We got a new demo for Unicorn Overlord, which is the strategy RPG coming out on March 8th by Vanillaware. I gave it a play this weekend, and I went in with very high expectations, as I tend to like Vanillaware games, and I tend to like strategy RPGs, and I'm very happy to say that not only did the demo meet those expectations, it exceeded them. This is the sort of demo where they just start you at the beginning of the game and give you 5 hours of game time, but notably, the demo doesn't count time spent in menus against your 5 hours. Since this is a game where a lot of play happens in menus, this meant that the demo for me was more like 8 hours long. And those 8 hours won't be wasted, because you can carry over your save data from the demo into the full game when it comes out. Alright, so the game kicks off with our young blue-haired lord being spirited away from his kingdom as it's captured by an evil army. If that premise sounds a lot like Fire Emblem 1, that's because it is. The game clearly takes inspiration from lots of classic strategy RPGs, and if you're a Fire Emblem fan, which I expect you are if you're here on this channel, you'll see the writing and gameplay inspiration from it pretty constantly. At times you can practically see the DNA from classic strategy RPGs. But Unicorn Overlord puts enough of its own spin on the elements that it takes inspiration from that they feel more like cute references and don't make the game feel too derivative. Once the story gets going, you'll feel pretty much right at home as you run around adding characters to your army until you're strong enough to fight the more powerful armies that control the realm. Since the demo is just the beginning of the game, it mostly introduces a bunch of characters and the central conflict, so there's not too much to say about the story yet beyond that I like the characters and think the story has potential even if it hasn't wowed me yet. But what we get a better glimpse of in the demo is the gameplay, and oh boy is there a lot going on here. In each battle, you deploy and control squads or units that consist of multiple characters. So instead of moving 12 characters around the map individually, you might move them around in 4 squads of 3. When fully upgraded, each squad can hold up to 6 people, 3 in the front row, 3 in the back. But in the demo, I only got my squads upgraded to hold a maximum of 3 people. Each member of a squad has passive and active abilities, and at the start of the game, these abilities often include an active attack skill and a passive defense skill. When in combat, characters take turns using their abilities until everyone's out of actions and then the combat ends. If neither side dies, the winner is whoever has more HP by the end of the fight, and the loser is knocked back and has to rest for a moment before they can move again. This alone can actually get pretty complicated. In a fight where a 3-character squad fights another 3-character squad, there are likely 12 or more skills at play, and that's before we even get to the unique features of each class, such as soldiers that pierce columns of units, meaning that if they attack an enemy and there's another enemy behind that enemy, your soldier will hit both of them. So how you position your characters in your squads can impact how combat plays out. There are also some character types that can assist others from afar, such as archers who can fire a rain of arrows at enemies their allies fight. Each squad also picks a leader who determines how fast they move and provides a leadership skill such as the ability to reduce damage from arrow rain from archers. So right off the bat, there are a ton of factors that play into which side wins a battle. And even beyond that, each character also has valor skills, which are special abilities that you can use outside of fights for all sorts of effects. Our main character, for example, can use valor skills to buff his EXP gain or buff the damage of all of the squads around him. Our Cavalier, Clive, can use a Valor skill to instantly charge a long distance, hurting enemies in his path. These powerful skills cost Valor points, which you earn by fighting enemies. So what Valor skill you want available in each squad is another factor to consider when you're putting your squads together. So there's tons to consider when you construct your squads, and you want to make them in a way that best takes advantage of the characters you have, whether that means combining classes that synergize well together or keeping characters together that have a good rapport bonus, which are bonuses characters get when they fight alongside other characters that they're close with. And these are just the basics that affect how fights play out in Unicorn Overlord. When we get into how the gameplay plays out on the map, there's even more to consider. How you lay out your squads, who leads your squad, and how you position characters in the squad is all important to have the most success in battle. And if that sounds a little overwhelming, it can be. But don't stress about it too much. I played the demo on the highest difficulty, and despite making lots of mistakes, I was able to finish all of the maps. So even though there's lots of room for optimization and mistakes, the game so far has not been overly punishing. And pretty simple and obvious team formulas can lead to success. Like putting a tanky character or a thief that can dodge a lot in the front line and your damage dealers in the back line of your squad is a good, simple formula that will help you have success as you learn the game's deeper mechanics. While fights between squads happen in turn-based fashion, with each unit taking turns using their active and passive abilities, maneuvering your characters around the map in between fights happens in real time. Instead of having a grid like we have in many SRPGs, you simply have a map where you can order characters to move. Mobility is dependent on class type, so horses move quickly, armored characters move slowly, and griffin knights and angels can fly over terrain. One of the neat things about this game is that since you can choose who the leader of each squad is, you can get the good qualities of a slow character with good combat without sacrificing mobility. While I was playing, for example, I put my armored character in a squad with a horse unit, and I would just make the horse character the leader of the squad when I wanted high movement, and the armored character the leader if I thought the map instead called for his leadership ability, which reduced damage from archers. The real-time nature of the battles is one of my favorite parts of the game, particularly because the game puts a time limit on each map. The time limit's very generous, but its existence acts as a nice guardrail for some of the other features in the game. For example, you can have a unit spend real time at forts in order to heal them, and every handful of fights that a character participates in, they need to take a little bit of time to rest before they can get back into combat. Without the time limit on each map, you would be able to do effective but boring strategies like sitting on a fort until all of your health recovers, or using almost exclusively your best character and just resting them a lot to regain their stamina so that they can fight a lot. The time limit for each map is relaxed enough that the demo wasn't stressful, and you could make use of resting and fort healing in moderation, but you can't overuse them to the point where maps were trivialized. The timer's well tuned to keep the action moving and prevent you from turtling the fun out of the game without breathing down your neck too much. And speaking of using forts for healing, healing in general is interesting in this game. Of the characters I got to try in the demo, most of them heal during battle as either an active ability in the case of our veteran horse character Joseph, or as a passive that happens when someone gets hit or at the end of battle like our soldier Chloe. The only class I've seen that can heal without fighting themselves is the cleric class, who can heal nearby allied squads when they get into fights. So if you want to heal, you need to get into a fight, or wait on a fort, or use a consumable healing item or valor skill. The key here is that there is no risk and cost-free way to heal. You either have to find a fight, which has some risk, or spend some sort of resource for your healing. I love this. That healing isn't free means every combat matters. Even if you dominate a fight, taking only a few points of damage in return, those few points of damage might matter down the line if you can't find a time to wait at a fort and heal them. So you're incentivized to try to find the best fights possible, and think not just about the fight that you're taking now, but the next couple fights you'll be taking a few minutes from now as well. This is both to avoid having to use fort healing and to save your healing items. One thing I will note is that the system working well will depend somewhat on how readily available money is. Using an item doesn't take any time, so if there's enough money to just buy a bunch of healing items that you can use whenever you get damaged, my praise for this system will be somewhat moot. But it's difficult to tell how the game's economy is going to look like from just the demo, so my hope is that it will be tight enough that you care about how many healing items you're using and don't want to waste them. The last thing I want to talk about for battles is the maps and enemy design. The early game maps are fairly simple, as they introduce you to the game's basic concepts. The first few are either single path maps where you're essentially just fighting enemies in a line, or two path maps with one side objective for you to grab. Each map progressively introduces some new ideas, such as enemy archers that will assist their allies from far away, or thieves that will dodge attacks but can be countered with squads that attack multiple times, or by an archer that's guaranteed to hit them. Before long though, the maps start to get more complicated, with more enemy structures and interesting enemy formations that encourage you to think and use your tools more. One of my favorite parts of the demo was on a map that makes heavy use of archers and archers in towers. Both of these can chip at your characters while you fight other enemies, so you want to take them out quickly. The challenge is that in order to get to the archer towers, you have to get by the enemy squads in front of them first. You can do this by flying around the choke point instead of going through them, but what I found fun was using Clive's Valor skill to charge through the choke point, bypassing the enemy and allowing him to go knock the archer tower down. Using my Valor skill smartly to get around a difficult part of the map gave me the good brain chemicals. And what's cool about this game is that there were several different ways that I could have dealt with that situation. I could have used my armored character's leadership skill that makes his squad take less damage from ranged assists, or I could have sent my flyer to go kill the tower, or I could have just pushed through the choke point with my heftiest units and spent a healing item to deal with any damage taken from the archers. All of these options would have worked, but all come with some trade-off, like a cost in Valor points to use the Valor skill, or an expenditure of items, or a loss of time as your flyer has to go around the choke point and your armored character's mobility isn't very high. These multiple options, combined with the huge amount of customizability in the construction of your squads, makes for a game with a lot of player expression. Everyone will play a little differently on their first playthrough, and multiple playstyles seem to be supported. In between battles, you can run around in Overworld and talk to different NPCs littered around the map, as well as pick up items or view rapport conversations, which are one-on-one conversations between units that add characterization and make them like each other a bit more. Towns and castles are also spaced out on the Overworld, and you can use them to buy items and equipment or hire generic soldiers to bolster your ranks. You can also upgrade the towns by performing deliveries, which are just quests in which towns ask you to bring certain items to them in exchange for rewards. The most interesting thing here is the hiring of generic soldiers at the castles. What's neat about the generic soldiers is that they are much more customizable than the characters that join your army in the story. You'll be able to pick what class you want your generic to be, as well as influence their starting stats and growth rates by choosing stat profiles for them. I mostly made offensively focused generics by giving them the offensive, keen, or all-rounder stat profiles, but you'll be able to mold these generic soldiers into whatever you want to fit them into your army. This is a nice way to provide players an opportunity to play around with the class system of the game and build whatever sort of army they want to. I expect there will probably be full generic runs of this game, and I think they're going to be pretty fun to play and watch. The generic system is just another super customizable system that's going to be fun for people that want to engage with it. And that's pretty much the story of Unicorn Overlord. It's loaded with systems that it wants the players to engage with, and it's a blast to watch how your choices play out on the battlefield. For people that really like digging into these systems and finding optimizations, it's going to be a good time. The last thing I want to touch on for this game is the presentation. Unicorn Overlord is a vanillaware game, and it boasts the type of visuals you would expect from them: bright, colorful, and memorable. The maps into Overworld are aesthetically pleasing, and the character designs are really eye-catching. The thief, Travis, became one of my favorites the moment he stepped onto the screen because I just love his design so much. And a couple other standouts for me were our soldier Chloe and our archer Rolf. The animations in the game also look great, and for the amount of things that happen in them, they are pretty snappy. And you can even speed the animations up at the press of a button if you don't want to turn them off, but do want to cut down on the amount of time you're spending in battle. Beyond the visuals, the music in Unicorn Overlord impresses me as well. Unfortunately, I can't play any for you in this video, as my streams of the game were both demonetized for using the soundtrack, but trust me, it's a good one, and I can't wait to hear the whole thing. So all in all, I had a really good time playing Unicorn Overlord. There's a ton of fun planning to do outside of battle, and the on-map gameplay rewards you for that planning, while providing interesting scenarios to play through. I feel pretty confident that when I play the full release of the game, maps are going to increase in their complexity and become even more interesting, as that was the trend during my time with the demo. The story has yet to really impress me, but I like a lot of the characters, and I think there's potential for it to become more interesting in the full release. If you like strategy RPG gameplay, I really can't recommend this demo enough. The only caveat I would give is it might not click right away. The first couple battles are mostly tutorials, and the game throws a lot of information at you really fast, and you don't have a ton of interesting decisions to make at this point. So at first, I just felt a little confused, but before long, the game opens up its systems and things really start to click. So if the game isn't doing it for you right away, I recommend giving it at least a few battles. I think you'll like it. And fortunately, since the demo is free, you don't have to spend anything to find out if you do. If you're at all interested in SRPGs, I really think you gotta try this demo. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, and a big thank you to my geckos on Patreon, and a shout out to my skinks Red Mage Morgan, Chicken, Morg Wolf, Upscale Furry Trash, Cosplay Sylveon, Emma, Van West, Aikipoo, Lucy Sev, Romeo, Wingman, Lonely Voxel, and Aaron Geddon. I really appreciate all of your support, and if you want to support the channel and appear in videos like this, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the video description. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, and have yourself a lovely week.